Assalamu alaikum, you're watching Views and News and I'm Faisal Rehman live from our Islamabad studios. Today, a very important development, I would say, a very important issue that we have picked up to talk about is about the India's deployment of Russia's air defense system along the Pakistani border. Yes, I'm talking about the S-400 missile system that is one of the most advanced and one of the most lethal that can engage hundreds and hundreds of targets from one single battalion. Just imagine. And you know what a battalion is? It's kind of a setup from where a certain attack could be tackled, and they have got almost 5 battalions now. The deliveries, they are coming in, and by the end of this year, say in another couple of days, the total number of missiles and the systems that were supposed to be provided to the Indians, that deal will be completed. Now, we have also learned that a lot of Indian officers, along with some technical staff, they have been able to get some very serious training in Russia, and now they are back in India to look after the affairs. Now, another very important factor, I read an article in which obviously we always talk about this very important issue of the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. Whether you talk about Turkey, you talk about Iran, you talk about North Korea, even you talk about Russia, this is what they use to curtail or to put a check on some sort of a military deal. But as far as India is concerned, the Americans have shown a lot of relaxation. So you can well imagine the kind of engagement they have with the Indian authorities at the moment. The government of India pretty much got away with the sanctions. Now, what is that supposed to mean? Are they planning another kind of an attack, a threat, or perhaps some sort of a false flag operation all along the LOC, or what exactly do they have in their mind? Now, Pakistan and China both need to be very, very, I would say, concerned about the current development. But as we all know that whatever it seems like can't be like that, because when you talk about the adversaries of China, whether it is Pakistan or it is, when you talk about the adversaries of India perhaps, sorry, whether it's China or Pakistan, the placement or the area they have chosen is Punjab. So they can look after the affairs in Kashmir, they can look after any sort of a threat perception from the Chinese side or from the Pakistani side. But let's see what exactly is going on in that particular area. So let me quickly introduce you to our panelists. Let me introduce you to Mr. Kaswar Klasra, senior journalist. He's in our studio, sir. Thank you so much for your time. And on Skype from Potsdam, Germany, Mr. Harley, Shclanger, political analyst, is going to join us, sir. Pleasure to have you, sir, in our program. And on the telephone, we'll be talking to Dr. Adil Sultan Saab. He's the Dean of Air University, and we'll be engaging him in the later half of our program. But let me put this question to you, sir. Klasra Saab, when you read the story that the Indians have deployed a Russian air defense system along the Pakistani border somewhere in Punjab, obviously, so we do understand that this is a very, very advanced system. It is something that can really negotiate with whatever sort of an aerial threat is posed, a missile defense system, that is also what we have learned. So it can manage plenty of squadrons of the Air Force if they are deployed at the right time. So that means that this is clear cut a very, very strong edge to the Indians.
Exactly.
And other than that, whether we like it or we don't, we always talk about the February 27th incident. But remember, the Indians were really saying that, you know, if we had Rafales, things would have been different. Now they have got Rafales, right? They have got the top-notch 5th generation aircraft, proper training and all. Do you think this particular move, the procurement of these two, one, I'm talking about the French jets, and the second is about the S-400 missile system. Do you think that has changed the balance in this particular part?
Well, I believe the balance of power, has tilted soon after India acquires Rafale and then now Super S-400. I think to some extent the balance of the power when we discuss Pakistan and India, so clearly that is held tilted towards the Indian side as well. And you already know that India has always kicked out, always ignited the arms race in the region. I think acquiring of S-400, I think it's it should be taken as the act of war against the Pakistan, because definitely Pakistan will have to look forward to to counter S-400 as well. But when we talk about this region, unfortunately, millions of people here, even in India, 420 the million people, they are living below the poverty line. And what is your priority? And you are acquiring Rafale, and then you are going to acquire the superb S-400. I think priorities must be taken care of. But as your question is concerned, definitely the balance of power has tilted, and Pakistan already have some of the superb missile defense system like HQ-9 and other things as well. But definitely Pakistan will have to look to its friends, either China, either the Turkey and other friends as well. But clearly the balance of power has tilted towards India as well. They have got an edge after acquiring Rafale and then super S-400, and Pakistan has to be worried about, because it's not ordinary thing, and we have to look forward to our friends to acquire latest the technology, latest weapon as well. But definitely the power the balance of power has tilted towards Indians as well, and Pakistan must be worried about that.
And I'm sure very, very rightly, in fact, explained, because this is what the obvious is. This is what it looks like. Now, Mr. Harley, obviously you're sitting in Germany. You must have been reading about it, and I'm sure you must have been following. Despite the American pressure, the Indians went forward. And then there was this recent visit of Mr. Vladimir Putin. I mean, everything was taken care of in that particular part as well. Whereas on one side, we see that there is a strategic partnership between India and the United States of America. But on the other hand, sir, when you see the Indians acquiring S-400 and getting away with it also, no sanctions, nothing, as compared to Turkey or Korea or Iran or perhaps certain other countries. Number one, sir, the Americans believe that the reason they gave to the Turks that you should not buy it because for the American technology, this is pretty useless, not meant for our equipment, and it cannot counter that. So that's how they were trying to satisfy the Turks. Whereas the Greece, they were talking about it, and so many other countries, they were also the NATO members. Having said that, sir, Pakistan, since we rely on our JF-17 as far as the jets are concerned, and primarily the main striker is F-16. So what sort of a threat it is going to pose to our Air Force? And on top, because Pakistan has developed a very good missile system, sir, when we talk about the latest technology that we have in that particular regard. But sir, at the same time, when you read about S-400, it has a lot to offer. That is a potential threat. Your take on that part, sir?
Well, I think the previous speaker made the point that this does reflect a shift in the balance. But from Europe, my view is we have to look at this from a higher standpoint. What does Russia have to gain from providing these weapons to India? And I think we have to look at the very worrisome problem of the efforts of the NATO and American forces to carry out a containment policy against Russia and China. And the Putin visit to India last week was an attempt to pull India away from this Anglo-American deployment of containing Russia and China. You know, there's been a push to bring India into the so-called D10 to replace the G7, bring India, Australia, and South Korea in. This comes from primarily from the British, but also from Biden. Secondly, the idea of the Quad, which would include India, discussion of an Asian NATO force in the Indo-Pacific region. This is all very dangerous and destabilizing. Now, what Putin is looking at is trying to get the United States to recognize why Russia sees the Ukraine deployment of NATO as a threat to Russia. And at the same time, the shift to Asia, the pivot to Asia, is a threat to both Russia and China. So to look at the situation with India, Pakistan, I think you have to realize that Putin and Xi Jinping just had a very positive summit a week ago in which they talked about collaboration on the broad military strategic front. Putin is not trying to destabilize Pakistan. In fact, Putin has been very complimentary to the role that the Pakistan government is playing in trying to stabilize the situation in Afghanistan. And I think that's important because you have the extended troika, which includes Russia, China, the United States, and Pakistan. So far, the U.S. is doing very little there. But there is a potential to break out of this Anglo-American geopolitics. And I think that's what Putin is going for. In the short term, it probably looks quite destabilizing from the standpoint of living in Pakistan. But I think in the long term, the extent to which there can be a shift away from British geopolitics, that's the longer term stability depends on that. And I think that's what Putin is aiming for.
Now, Mr. Harley, first of all, since if you look at the area of the deployment, I mean, that is right in Punjab, which the Indians believe that they can look after the affairs in Kashmir, Ladakh. Having said that, any threat coming in from Pakistan. So, now, since we were talking about this very important date, that is the February 27th, 2019, whatever happened, the whole world witnessed. And there was a very strong reply from the Pakistani side, still being a smaller country. But the Indians got hold of it, and later on the kinds of statements they issued, one was that, if we had Rafales, things could have been different. Now, sir, they have Rafales. They have got this S-400 in place over there, sir. What if the Indians, in fact, just try to go and opt for a false flag operation somewhere along the LOC or otherwise? So the kind of potential that Pakistan has, the aerial response basically, do you think that is going to be as effective as it was, let's say, 2 years ago?
Well, that's a difficult thing to assess because at this point we don't fully know, or at least I don't know, what the intent of India is to use these new missiles, whether they see them as a sense a deterrent, or whether they are actually thinking of some kind of offensive action. You do have some people in India who are very happy with the idea of British geopolitics and pitting every country against each other, including India against Pakistan. The question is, are there people in India who can see beyond their short-term confrontation and provocation and actually think about what are in the interests of long-term security? That's why I brought up the Afghan question. Clearly, the most important situation right now in Central Asia is stabilizing Afghanistan. Can there be a coordinated effort to do that? And if so, why would Putin come in with these weapons to India other than to say, look, we don't want you to go with the United States and NATO. We want to have an alternative. And obviously, that has to take into consideration the concern that Pakistan has with the arming of India with these kinds of weapon systems.
All right. Now, coming to you, Klasra, since you mentioned that around 220 million people live below the poverty line in India, it doesn't make any difference to me, sir, whether they eat or they don't. This is the issue and the responsibility of their government.
Exactly.
What matters to me is about our people, number one. And secondly, sir, when you see that the clear-cut bias of the Americans is very, very obvious. For example, putting pressure on the Turks, though they are the members of the NATO, yet they were not allowed to buy, or there is a lot of pressure on them. So the case is when it comes to India, it's the other way around. So the Americans really want to, manufacture certain models. I would say the F-23 that they call, perhaps the modern version of F-16. The Americans really want the Indians to shift from the Russian technology to the American technology, the way they have given them over 200 drones to look after the affairs in the Indian Ocean. And then you talk about the intelligence sharing, you talk about the use of bases, you talk about the the development regarding building up, I would say, weapons of mass destruction, because at the end of the day, even a bullet can kill. So yeah. So considering all this, just to make sure that India should pose a threat to the Chinese and to the Pakistanis, perhaps in real terms it is China they want to counter and they want to contain and engage. Sir, what sort of an effect it is going to have on the region? Because now you're talking about India a nuclear power, Pakistan a nuclear power, China another
Yeah.
nuclear power, and then bordering the China, you have North Korea a nuclear power, you have Russia a nuclear power. Just imagine this area. Look how many nuclear powers are there in this particular area, and look
exactly.
how many are bordering China for that matter.
Exactly. You have raised a very good point and excellent question as well. And think acquiring of the S-400 by the Indian side, it has exposed the duality of Americans as well. Look what Americans have done with Turkey, Iran, and then North Korea as well. And Americans have slapped the sanction against all of the states which either acquired Russian systems or try to acquire. But when it comes to India, and you must remember that American lobby played an important role to push French to to strike a deal, the Rafale deal with Indians as well. You can't neglect the the role of American lobby as well. So
despite all odds and the economic issues that
Exactly.
were in Greece,
Yeah.
the Americans told them to buy their jets.
Even I was expecting the acquisition of S-400 by the Indian. They can put to some extent the relationship between India and America on stake. But I was really surprised, and not only that, they didn't utter any single word on acquisition of S-400 by the Indians, and still they are silent. It's a big question mark. I think that is the point that
Sir, because they are enjoying that position
that
of
also
strength.
shows that Americans can go to extra mile when it comes to the push or even support the countries who have who have been engaged against Chinese as well. So I think Americans have exposed acquisition of S-400 have exposed American, and I think the world community must take it into account as well. I think the European bloc must come forward, and because it's a duality. It's a duality. And one more important thing, that not only that they have acquired, the Rafale and now S-400, they have also acquired sophisticated drone technology from Turkey as well. So I think American, the Indians have been already on the track to push this region into another arms race, and that is that is something China, Iran, and Pakistan must be very important.
Definitely. Now we have also been joined in by Dr. Adil Sultan Sahab, Dean of the University. Dr. Sahab, Assalamu alaikum.
Ji, Assalamu alaikum.
Dr. Sahab, thank you so much for your time, sir. Now, talking about this very important story where we learned that the Indians have been able to get hold of this S-400, very, very latest missile defense system. Perhaps they have two major adversaries. One is Pakistan, one is China. Not a single word coming in from the Americans, despite that they have said that do not go for it. But yet, I think there is a larger interest at the end of the day. And having said that, what this particular deal is supposed to mean to a country like Pakistan, sir? Is it the beginning of the arms race that was always there, but it is going to really fuel it more? Or perhaps this is going to pose a real threat to Pakistan because we always expect a false flag operation from the Indians. And sir, what about our ability to strike back on India in the presence of these S-4s and Rafales for that matter? Your take.
Yeah, thank you very much for raising these important questions. First of all, while we talk about the Americans are probably stuck in a difficult situation. They had been telling India not to buy arms from Russia, but India is doing what it can say itself best for its own interest. It is buying from the Americans. So they, on one hand, they want India to stay away from Russia. On the other hand, they also think that if they push too hard, India might tilt more towards Russia. So they are in a kind of a catch-22 situation. So that's where we also see you mentioned about the Kaswar Act and things like that. Why Americans are reluctant to apply those sanctions. While they were threatening, they applied on Turkey. But the same standards they didn't apply on India. So that's one point. The second, the implications that you talked about on Pakistan or for the region. This has been a long-standing India's position because they think that militarily they are much stronger than Pakistan. And they should have an option that where they can coerce Pakistan, they can strike Pakistan, they can take offensive actions against Pakistan. But as you have seen over the past several years, especially after nuclearization of South Asia, where the strategic balance was restored and a conventionally superior adversary like India cannot do anything against Pakistan because of the existence of this nuclear deterrence. So they had been exploring options to have that military option where they can exploit their military advantage against Pakistan. Unfortunately, they couldn't. Over the past several crises, what we have seen between India and Pakistan, Pakistan has always come up with some options as a counter, not really engaging in an arms race, not buying what India is buying, but developing or making some qualitative changes in its strategy that could neutralize India's advantage. So that's a major frustration for Indian military planners and the political leadership, because it becomes very difficult for them to justify why they're spending more than $70 billion and they have not been able to achieve any political objectives or exploit their military potential against Pakistan. So that has always been a major irritant amongst India's military planner. So in this context, once we talk about implications for Pakistan, I think it will affect the calculus, the strategic balance, but I don't think so it is going to matter much in terms of what India can do against Pakistan, because what we saw in 2019, February 2019, India was conventionally superior. It had a much bigger air force, but it couldn't exploit that military potential to achieve that military, or to give a signal that it can take punitive measure against an adversary, which is also a nuclear weapon state. Unfortunately, that realization is not there amongst India's political elite and the military leadership. And that's where the problem comes up. They continue to buy, they continue to introduce new weapon systems into the region and there's more to do with domestic politics also, because the BJP government in India, they always have tried to project itself, project itself as a nationalist, strong nationalist government which can take offensive measures against Pakistan, but they couldn't. So these military equipment or the missiles that India is buying, probably it's more of a prestige, and also to give message to the domestic public that we are acquiring, we are spending $5.5 billion, and we are developing options where in future, if need be, they can take military actions against Pakistan. But the past record suggests whatever India has done in terms of military advantage, in terms of introducing new warfighting concepts, Pakistan has been able to neutralize those doctrines also, and India's military capability also. So I'm sure that, yes, for the time being, it might seem as upsetting because these missile systems have been deployed in Punjab region against Pakistan, and what India had been professing to the rest of the world that they need these systems against Chinese threat. Exactly. But actually they have deployed these weapon systems against Pakistan. So that's a question mark.
Do you believe they have some sort of a design now? And because earlier, if you just relate a couple of stories, these statements from their politicians, from their military generals and all, one thing is very clear, that there was this, when you talk about the strategic threat, obviously Ladakh or Kashmir for that matter, do you think that because the way they added our Gilgit-Baltistan area in their map, and they also in fact added the Azad Kashmir part, do you think there is something brewing in the minds of the military in India, sir? And if so, what sort of a counter-deterrent policy do we have?
Absolutely. You are absolutely right. If you see the Gold Star doctrine or the proactive operations, which were developed after the nuclearization of South Asia, that were intended to create space for limited military conflict against Pakistan. But they couldn't. So, because Pakistan also came up with some qualitative innovation in terms of short-range ballistic missiles and gave clear message that whatever you do, we have options. So that has been a frustrating issue for the Indian military planners. So these S-400 system, as we see, we have always been arguing from the Pakistani side, like any BMD system or ballistic missile system in a region like South Asia is unlikely to work because of the short distance time. This is not like Soviet Union or the Russia and United States where you have 30 minutes of reaction time. we hardly have 3 to 4 minutes or 5, 6 minutes of missile flight time. So no BNG system is likely to work. But they are projecting the system as something that it can provide kind of an iron dome and cater for all kind of incoming missiles from Pakistan. So that leads to a very dangerous thinking. The political leadership, they can be given this false sense of confidence that we have a system, and if you want to take any offensive action against Pakistan, go ahead, because if Pakistan retaliates, if the crisis escalate and Pakistan retaliates, our S-400 system or the ABM system, indigenous ballistic missile defense system that India is also building, these would be enough to cater for incoming missiles. Now, in reality, they do it or not, but it can give that false sense of confidence to the political leadership to become more hawkish, more offensive against Pakistan.
Exactly.
And that's
Because
where
they
the
know they have
danger
legs.
lies.
Exactly. Now coming to you, Mr. Harley, you heard what the Dean of Air University, Dr. Adil Sultan said. I mean, things can go from bad to worse in a matter of minutes if the appropriate steps are not taken. Now, talking about the appropriate steps, sir, would you like to define and throw light that what exactly should be done from a country like Pakistan, where there is a clear and present danger from the Indian side, sir? Obviously, there is something they have in their mind, and perhaps they are looking for some sort of a serious, I would say, engagement in the northern, or rather north western side of India, sir.
Well, I think what this discussion has underscored is the problem when things are limited to geopolitics. Because you end up at one point that any side that makes an agreement to expand its arms production or arms deals causes a reaction from the other side and shortens the time that nations have to decide what they do in the case of an attack. This is the problem. This is why I brought up the question of Russia and Ukraine. Because here you have Putin saying that the Russians are going to have to respond within minutes to any action in Ukraine right now, and that they don't have the ability to, they don't have a buffer zone anymore. You have the same situation between India and Pakistan. That's why we have to break with the thinking of geopolitics, which defines nations in terms of adversarial relationships. And that's why I also come back to the Afghan situation. What's crucial is to break the old British great game policy of we win, you lose, and instead look for mutually beneficial policies like the Chinese are trying to do with the Belt and Road Initiative. Suppose you had India, Pakistan, China, and Russia combining in an economic effort to reconstruct Afghanistan. That would begin to build the trust so that you wouldn't have an arms race or a commitment from one side or the other to be strong enough to repel the other side. So I think we've got to move. I mean, here we are, it's going into 2022, and we're still stuck in the same mid-19th century great power politics. We have to get smarter than that and better than that. And I think this situation just exemplifies that problem.
All right. Now, very important, in fact, point mentioned that India and Pakistan, Russia and China, they all work together to, uplift the Afghan situation, make sure that, I would say, sanity prevails there. At the end of the day, so what we have realized that there is a lot of trust deficit between the Indians and the Pakistanis, and that is not something which is going to go away in a matter of weeks or days or months. That was there, will remain there, and God knows what future holds for both these countries. One thing is for sure, sir, that the overall, when you talk about the geostrategic importance of Pakistan and India, sir, there was a time when Pakistan was important. Pakistan still is important. But I think India is, getting really close to the Americans. And this was something which we had never seen before. These are the latest, approach, and these are the times when we have seen that these two countries are really engaging well. I still remember one of the statement of Mr. Donald Trump when he took charge, and he said that, we have India to look after Pakistan.
Exactly.
So that is something which they have in their mind, that just in case Pakistan. Exactly. And now, since they're not happy with Pakistan, let me be very straight. They are in fact scapegoating Pakistan for all their failures in Afghanistan. And they perhaps really want to teach a lesson to Pakistan, whether by supporting the non-state actors or supporting India or other Pakistani adversaries, sir. So challenging times ahead for Pakistan, where you have got an serious economic crisis, where you have a serious political crisis in Pakistan. Look at the results of these elections in KP, where the government had a very strong hold, but this is what it is like. At the end of the day, there seems to be a lot of problems brewing for Pakistan, sir.
Exactly. You have rightly pointed out that these are challenging times for Pakistan, because on the economic front, I am sorry to say we have badly failed. And also we have seen what happened there in KP's, the local body election as well. So that is a challenging time, but I think what Pakistan needs to do is to mobilize its, the diplomats that has been stationed around the globe.
So this is what we've been hearing since ages.
Exactly.
This is what
the right time. This is the right time. This is the right time. They have to, to give results as well. We have been, hearing from them for last 20, 30 years, but that is the right time, because the Pakistan has been faced with numerous challenges. Even, as you have rightly pointed out, that the Americans has put all of their blames, all of the failures their failures there in Afghanistan. They have just put blame on Pakistani side as well. And also China's factor is there, as you have rightly pointed out, that the geopolitics has changed, and now India has emerged as Americans' ally in the region, because definitely they want to counter China, whether in the South China Sea and whether in South Asia. So definitely what we have been enjoying the position for long time, now the Indians have come forward. They are they are enjoying this position as well. At one side they have developed great connection with Russia, on the other side they have moved to the point where we can say that they are the perfect ally for Americans as well. So definitely Russia and the Americans, they are giving sophisticated arms, ammunition, everything. They want to counter China, and definitely the arms and ammunition and every support India is getting, definitely that's going to be used against Chinese and Pakistan as well. So I think now we have to find great friends across the world. This is the right time. The government of Pakistan will have to mobilize its diplomatic community to give results, and this is the right time that if we want to counter economic fronts.
I'll just give you a little example, sir, because the point is that if I start thinking that I'm very strong and I can fight Bruce Lee for that matter, so he is going to give me a bloody nose within a matter of 5 seconds, right, sir?
Exactly.
So one has to be realistic. That is what I believe in. It's good to be optimistic, but it's more important to be realistic. Now, my point is, sir, when you look at the Indian diplomacy, the way they have engaged all the Muslim countries, especially the Gulf countries.
Even they have great influence there in OIC as well, in the Gulf as well.
That is what I'm saying. They have been invited. Narendra Modi, who was never granted a visa for America because of the human rights issues.
Yeah.
This man is given the highest civil awards in Saudi Arabia, in Bahrain, in UAE.
What happened there in Texas? Howdy Modi even.
All right, Howdy Modi.
Yes, exactly.
What I'm saying is that number one. Secondly, you talk about the Indian diplomacy, the way they have engaged the Russians for a very long time, and they have in fact sucked them in a way that they have been able to get all the military hardware from them. Now the Americans are desperate and dying to give them, and they are in a position to negotiate the Indians. With the Chinese, no matter what sort of an adversary China is considered in India, but at the end of the day, their trade volume is over $100 billion.
And the beauty is they have developed great, the relationship with two enemies. At one side, they are allied to American. Americans are on the other side. They are getting, the sophisticated arms and ammunition, S-400 and other
from
things
Russia also.
From the Russia. And Russia
that is what I'm
Americans
saying.
are great enemies.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the beauty of
this is I
diplomacy.
think one should give the devil his due, and I think they have done a brilliant job, whereas we have failed at multiple levels. Let's be very honest.
Yeah.
Let me take this point to Dr. Adil. Your point, sir.
Yeah, about diplomacy, the way Indians have played. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it because one can argue both ways. I see it that India is pushing itself in a difficult situation because on one side it wants to have hardware from the United States because that is technologically more advanced, and it wants to get Rafale aircraft from the French, and at the same time it wants to continue its military relations with Russia also. Now, if from looking from the military operational aspect, it makes it quite difficult for any military to integrate military equipment from different origin and operationalize it and use it as per the strategy. I've always argued that what India is doing, there seems to be dissonance amongst India's strategic leadership. They continue to project something, but what actually they do is quite different. So that's where I do not worry much about once they acquire or they spend these waste $5.5 billion because in the end, if you see, how are they going to operationalize it against China and Pakistan? Because whatever we say, what we have heard about these systems, all the military, there is no perfect system, anti-ballistic missile system in the world as of now. So what India or the Russia, what they are projecting, I see it more of a power game where India wants to project that it can defend its border or it can also provide security assurance to the allies. So this whole military projection or development is in the same context. And there is where your point about diplomacy also is relevant. Yes, India is playing its cards smartly, but India has the potential also, so that we have to accept that. They have diplomatic capital also, they have financial resources also, and they have vast human resource all over the world which project India's point of view or narrative around the world and create that perception that India is rising and shining. But reality is far different from what India projects. Yes, they have strengths, but they have weaknesses also. We have weaknesses, but we have certain strengths also. So that is how I look at this situation. So if you allow, I'll just talk about this building of trust. This point was raised by my colleague. Yes, in theory, we all want peace in this region, and Pakistan has always been saying we are ready for peace talks with India. It is the other side. India being a bigger player in the region, bigger power, India has to take a lead, but Pakistan has been offering that we are open to dialogue and talk everything on the table, and including how to bring normalcy to this region, bring peace to this region. But India has a different perception that it wants to be seen as a potential global power or regional hegemon. So there's a conflict in India's goals and objectives, which makes it difficult for the Indian decision makers to.
Okay, sir.
Yeah.
Let me be very realistic here, sir.
Yeah.
Whether we, because so if you, do not like somebody, it doesn't mean that that person cannot be liked by other people. Number one. We might have our own issues with the Indians, but perhaps the reality is that they are almost becoming the third largest economy in the world. Look at the amount of resources they have, the kind of engagement with the Western world, with the Europeans, Americans, with the Gulf countries, with even countries like Russia and Far Eastern countries. Just imagine when Mahathir Mohamad issued a statement in favor of Kashmir. In fact, they withdrew their $4 billion worth of palm oil deal. So that is the kind of strength they have. Whereas we are begging for money, in front of the whole world. So beggars can't be choosers, and you can't have that kind of a respect. That's a reality, sir. All right. Otherwise, things would have been very different. I'm not going to blame any particular government, but I'm going to blame every single consecutive government in Pakistan for that, sir. Because if we have come to this verge, there has to be reason for that. India, if they want to become the regional power, I believe they have already become the regional power, sir. They're a nuclear country. They have their submarines. They have their aircraft carriers. They have the best of the best air force, I would say. Training couldn't be worst. Obviously, if they're flying those jets. But, we always undermine India. And I think that is the biggest problem of Pakistan, sir. Isn't it?
Yeah, I agree to most of what you have said, and that's the reality. But I'm being realistic. Yes, India has the potential, I'm not trying to undermine. Nobody should undermine their adversary. So, like I said, they have strengths, but they have weaknesses. But what I am trying to point out is what India projects itself. If you say it's a regional power, look at the relations of India in the region. None of the regional countries have good relations except for one or two countries because of India's policies that they want to be hegemon in this region. So since we are talking about S-400, its implications in the region, what I'm trying to say is that India has always been conventionally superior to Pakistan. But over the past several crises, even February 2019, India has the same advantage in the Air Force. But once it comes to the operational deployment or the use of its military tool for achieving political objectives, we have seen that India has miserably failed against Pakistan. So that's what I'm trying to make a point. But I do agree, nobody should undermine their adversary. Pakistan has its own weaknesses. We should also look at those. But we should not overplay India's strengths also. Yeah, that's my point.
I think so. One should always keep in account the strengths, the weaknesses. I mean, when we do the SWOT analysis, I'm sure we all do in order to determine the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities and the kind of threats that are posed. I mean, that is very important. Coming to you now, Sir Harley. Now, the question is that what should we do? We do not have enough money to acquire a similar system to counter India. We do not have that kind of an engagement. But the only option that we are left with is to go with the flow. And the flow is with the Chinese at the moment when it comes to Pakistan. Your take, sir?
Well, I think the Pakistan-China relationship is relatively strong. But to go back to what I was saying before, we're dealing with a totally destabilized world situation because of the role of the United States and NATO insisting that they're the unilateral power and can dictate to everyone else. Putin's negotiations with India reflect a rejection of that. The whole question of Putin and China is another rejection of this unilateral world order. India, for whatever reason, sided with Russia and China against the Green New Deal, which is part of that global world order. So it's a very complex and confusing situation, but just keep in mind one final point here. The geopolitical thinkers in the United States are trying to drive a wedge between Russia and China. Their view is you have to go back to the Nixon policy from the 70s, that the way the United States can be the sole superpower is to keep Russia and China against each other. And I think Putin's discussion with India is an attempt to pull India away from the United States. I think the question now is rather than tit for tat, should China and Pakistan form an alternative alliance, the best approach would be to have a Russia, China, India, Pakistan cooperation. Now, is that wishful thinking? Of course it is. But as I pointed out, there is a potential to do that involving reconstruction in Afghanistan. And I think the Pakistani role has been absolutely crucial. While the West is willing to kill off the children of Afghanistan with sanctions, Pakistan pulled together the OIC conference last weekend with an intent to provide an alternative. Russia and China will work together on that. Let's look where we can build trust so we're not trapped in this British geopolitical manipulation.
All right, I believe this is more about diplomacy now. One has to make sure that it really works and works well. Thank you so much, Mr. Harley. And it was a pleasure having you, Dr. Adil Sultan Sahab. Thank you so much, Mr. Klasra. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow at 8:05. Till then, you take care. Khuda Hafiz.